Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's episode of A Healthy Curiosity. I'm Brody Welch, and I'm here today with Dr. Robin Miller. Dr. Miller has written a book called Healed, which combines cutting-edge science with some basic advice for anyone who wants to take charge of their own health. Obviously, if you listen to this show, you are someone who already is interested in knowing what you can do to live as healthy and happy and illness-free life as you possibly can. And so I'm hoping that the information that she's gathered from her 33 years of treating patients and using the principles of integrative medicine can help us all live healthier and age optimally. Dr. Miller has trained with Andrew Weil as an Integrative Medicine Fellow at the University of Arizona, and she's currently the medical director of Triune Integrative Medicine in Medford, Oregon. She blogs regularly for sharecare.com, which is an interactive health and wellness website founded in conjunction with Dr. Mehmet Oz, where she serves as Executive Advisory Board member. Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, Dr. Miller.
Thank you.
So you were sharing with me a few minutes ago when we were chatting that you started off as a fairly conventionally trained physician and then shifted into integrative medicine. I'd love to hear a little bit about what prompted that switch in approach.
I did. So I was a regular internist. I did a fellowship at Johns Hopkins in internal medicine. And there I did research on preventive cardiology. And even then I was interested in preventing disease. We talked to patients about who are high risk, how to improve their lifestyle, exercise, eat healthy, lower their cholesterol, all those things. When I left my fellowship, decided to go into private practice. So when I came to Medford, that's what I did. And it was interesting at the time, this was in the 90s, that again, I was teaching to other physicians how important it was to eat healthy, lower cholesterol, prevent heart disease. And I remember one of the cardiologists standing up, this was like foreshadowing of the future, stood up and said, wait a minute, people don't need to worry about their cholesterol anymore because these statin drugs are coming out and they can just take a pill instead. And I have to say I was horrified. And that was just the beginning of what I saw as pills being prescribed for every ill and really people not getting back to the basics, which is again, eating healthy, exercising, really taking care of their health. And I remember one day working where my appointments were getting shorter and shorter and shorter, writing my 10th prescription and thinking that the woman I was in the room with really didn't need the prescription. She needed me to stop and listen to her and really figure out what was going on with her. At that point, I decided I can't do this anymore. I actually quit. And that's when I decided to do the Integrative Medicine Fellowship with Andrew Weil. So that's what I did. And afterwards started my clinic, my Integrative Medicine Clinic, where now I spend an hour and a half with each new patient, a half an hour in follow-ups, and an hour with each physical after I've seen people for the initial visit a year later.
You're basically doing what acupuncturists basically have to do, but offering that from an allopathic perspective, which is incredibly valuable because we need to know what's going on with our health through as many lenses, I think, as possible in order to understand fully how we can address some of these chronic issues and problems. And you really can't get a handle on what really is getting at the root of someone's health issues in a 2 to 7 minute office visit. And if that's what you're allowed to do as a physician, I could see how that could be incredibly limiting.
It was. And the truth is, if you give people time and space, 99.9% of the time, they will tell you what's wrong with them.
Right. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that the patient knows themselves better than any other professional can.
And so if you find the answer to that question, then you can get to the root of the problem and actually help them in a partnership role. And that's what I do. I partner with my patients to help them figure out how to be well.
Awesome. I want to go back to what you just said about cardiovascular risks, because yes, much is made of cholesterol in general. And from what I understand, it's actually not as important of an indicator, or at least that the total cholesterol is not exactly the most effective marker. And I'd like to hear from you what you feel are the important things to be paying attention to when it comes to cardiovascular risk factors.
I agree. Cholesterol, for many people, isn't the answer. I mean, there are populations of patients where their total cholesterol is 300 and they never get heart disease. So there's more to the question and more to the problem than we know. It's not just about cholesterol. In the book, I talk about the NMR profile that will tell you the type of particles of cholesterol you have, which I think is what's important.
Is that like the very low density lipoproteins, like those being the dangerous ones to look out for?
Exactly. And there's different kinds of bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. There's the dense kind and there's the fluffy kind. So there are people that have big fluffy LDL and maybe high in number, but it doesn't cause a problem.
So that's still what we would consider quote unquote bad bacteria, but it's actually not harmful, or not bacteria, rather, the quote unquote demonized bad cholesterol. But if the particles are big and fluffy, it's not such a big deal. The pernicious ones are the little dense, scrappy guys.
That's right. And same thing with HDL. HDL is good, but there are people who have high HDL or good cholesterol that have heart attacks. And that's probably because their good cholesterol isn't protecting them. There's two kinds of HDL. There's, again, the big fluffy kind and then the dense kind. Well, the big HDL particles go and get the cholesterol off the vessels, bring it back to the liver, and keep the damage from happening. But the small HDL particles don't. So that explains why some people with high HDL levels still may have a heart attack. So you kind of have to know what kind you have.
That is fascinating. And is that something that can be tested for?
Yes, easily. An NMR profile. And I talk about it in the book. And in fact, at the end of the book, on page 181, there's a cheat sheet you can take to your doctor that has all this information on it. So you can ask for what you want or what you think you might.
Awesome.
But there's also a cardiac risk factor that people are not aware of. And it's called TMAO, trimethylamine oxide. It's really amazing. So there's researchers at the Cleveland Clinic that have discovered this and done quite a bit of research. So the evidence is there. And it's been in Time magazine and all over the place, but now we can actually measure it. So TMAO is a compound that's formed after bacteria work on or eat the food in our gut. And it's the red meat, egg yolks, and farm-raised fish that actually produce the TMAO. So foods high in choline and carnitine are the ones that are the culprit. Now, some people don't form high TMAO levels. They just don't, but others do. And again, you can be tested for that. It's a fasting test. It's simple to do. It's a blood test. The Cleveland Clinic actually pays for the blood draw. The test costs $6. And I think really worth knowing, especially if you're somebody who's on a paleo diet or one of those things where you're eating a lot of red meat. I would want to know if I'm a TMAO maker.
That is absolutely where I was going with that. There is so many people who think that, okay, great. So everything we've ever learned about fat is bad. That's out the window because sugar was really the problem all along. And so there is this popularization of eating these super high fat, high protein, high animal protein diets that could be beautiful for some people and really not so good for others.
And, that's because genetically we're all programmed differently.
Yes.
And you can get a hint of that. There's a test I did on myself, actually. It's called VitaGene. And that tells you if you're that kind of person. Are you somebody who can metabolize fat really easily, or are you the carbohydrate person that gets fat on carbs? I'm a carbohydrate person genetically, but you can find that out on a gene test.
So interesting. It's like I personally have resisted the gene testing thing because I don't like thinking that my genes are determining my health and my destiny, because obviously we know that epigenetics are far more important than the genetic cards that we're dealt in terms of the outcomes of health that we can expect. And I just find it, I feel like, wow, if I knew that I was genetically set up for certain diseases and not others, I might feel really disempowered by that. But what you're saying is actually quite the opposite. It's basically that if we can learn things about ourselves, we might be able to crack the code on what kind of diet might be beneficial for us. This episode of A Healthy Curiosity is brought to you by my Basics of Chinese Medicine course. You probably know your Myers-Briggs type and your astrological sign, but do you know your Chinese element? Knowing your element can help you recognize your superpowers, your innate gifts, and how to maximize them. It can also help you avoid becoming a caricature of yourself. But better yet, when you understand your constitution, you can start to get to know which acupoints, meridians, foods, tastes, and activities are going to be medicine for you. And that, my friend, opens up a whole new world of self-care. Basics of Chinese Medicine is an 8-week deep dive into understanding your inner ecosystem. Registration is now open and we start October 18th. You'll learn how to confidently locate and use some of the most powerful acupoints and some essential oils that pair well with them, how to eat with the seasons, how to tell what a food or an herb does by how it tastes, as well as each internal organ's mystical powers, its emotional and psychological functions. To register, visit brodywelch.com, that's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH, and grab your spot. You were talking about earlier, even genetic testing for what kind of medications might be effective for depression. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what else we could potentially glean from genetic tests that could benefit us, that we can actually do something about instead of feeling sentenced to.
So many things. And you can override some of this genetic stuff too by being healthy, by doing healthy things. But there is a test I've been using. So when I have patients who are depressed, who may need medication, I have always felt like, how do I know what medicine's going to work? Because, some it's just a disaster, and others it's like, okay, I got the right one. Well, there is a test that I've been using. It's called GeneSight. It's made by this company called AssureX, and it was designed by Mayo Clinic. It is an excellent test, and it will show you how different drugs are metabolized in the liver enzyme system. The cool thing about the test I'm using is that it is individualized. So there are some medicines that may go through one enzyme pathway, but many go through several. So just looking at one gene doesn't help. You need something that's going to collate all that stuff, and that's what GeneSight does. So for instance, nortriptyline, which is a medicine we use to prevent migraine headaches, for sleep, it's an antidepressant, that goes through one enzyme system. Amitriptyline, which is very similar, and a lot of people use it for chronic pain, goes through several enzyme systems. So how do I know how someone's going to metabolize that drug? I don't, unless I use the GeneSight test. So it will tell me about antidepressants, it'll tell me about pain meds, and it tells me a little bit about behavior, because it's got a section on ADD, ADHD, and it actually checks the MTHFR gene as well. So it's pretty interesting, and it's a really good guide. It's not foolproof, obviously, but it's a good guide to figure out what medicine's going to work for you.
You just mentioned the MTHFR gene, which we have talked about previously on the podcast, but for listeners who might not know what that is, could you explain what it is and its significance to us?
Yes, so MTHFR is a gene. It codes for enzymes that help you metabolize folic acid. So when you take folic acid in your diet, a series of enzymes will work on it and turn it into L-methylfolate.
And why do we need folic acid?
Because, it's important for just life, but L-methylfolate helps you to make serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. All those things that make you happy, make you feel good, give you energy, and actually make your gut work. Because what most people don't realize is that your gut is lined with brain cells. If you looked in a microscope, it would look like a brain cell. And it secretes serotonin. So it's important for your gut as well as your brain health. So if you have a genetic mutation, meaning you have one of those genes or alleles missing off that gene, you could, if you have one, have lower L-methylfolate levels by about 30%. If you have two mutations, you're down by about 70%, and have been your whole life.
And that could be really important information to know,
and
especially for people suffering from mood disorders, right?
Right. So if I give you L-methylfolate, it actually will help either give you energy, improve your mood, improve your gut. It's pretty amazing. And so if I do get someone who's coming to me for a first-time treatment for depression, I always do that test first and try the L-methylfolate first if they have a mutation.
I'd like to hear more about gut health and its relationship to mood because, as you just touched on, that serotonin is produced in the gut, and there's this massive connection between the gut and the brain and our ability to digest. And of course, in Chinese medicine, that we think of the spleen stomach system as related to the mind, the quality of the thoughts, the intention, and the emotion of worry. And so there's just a lot of this really direct connection that Chinese medicine identifies and that allopathic medicine is starting to discover. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I'll tell you, the microbiome is fascinating, and it's just growing in our ability to help people and understand what's going on. And it's so funny. It all comes back to poop, isn't it?
It really is like the most mundane thing in the world. And it's so funny to me, like how when I ask patients, how's your digestion? And they're like, oh, it's fine. And then we get into the nitty gritty of that, and it's fine, except they're defining fine as they poop once every 3 days and they deal with gas and bloating and they're taking Tums 3 times a week. You know, like those are not fine. Those are like, if you're symptomatic in your gut and you're needing to regulate it on a regular basis, we should be eliminating easily and completely daily and having our digestive systems not talk to us at all. And there's and it's the kind of thing where like, just because it's normal to like, or it's very common to experience that doesn't mean that it is the normal state of affairs for a digestive tract. And it's like, we're so out of touch with that as a culture that we don't even know what it means. So yes, like a really, really important thing for people to, yes, look at your poop every day. You can glean a lot from it, and to do what you can to make sure that you are actually getting rid of toxins on a regular basis and not carrying them around in your body.
That's why it's so important to eat healthy, because if you aren't eating healthy, then you are not nurturing healthy gut bacteria. And that's what it's all about.
So what do you mean by eating healthy?
So I mean eating a whole food diet. I recommend plant-based because I think that's the healthiest. But the key is that you have healthy foods that are like prebiotics, onions, asparagus, that sort of food. That you feed your gut bacteria good food. So the prebiotics get to the gut so the gut bacteria can digest it. And probiotics. So fermented foods, really important. If you like sauerkraut, eat a lot of it. Because the thing is, if you have unhealthy gut bacteria, your gut is going to be unhealthy, you will be unhealthy. Because what will happen is you'll thin the lining of your gut and lipopolysaccharide will leak out and it's inflammatory. And you won't feel good. You'll feel like crap, literally.
Yes.
So,
and it can also be pivotal in weight loss, right? Like that study that was done in mice about that transferring gut bacteria from obese mice into thin mice. Those mice suddenly eating the same stuff became obese just because their gut flora wasn't up to the task, or it was having a different result in their bodies. And so the idea that eating something like sauerkraut and feeding our bodies, you said asparagus and what was the other thing that you mentioned as a prebiotic? Onions, thank you. Feeding the gut flora what they like to eat and having enough presence to begin with from probiotic sources can make a massive difference if we're trying to lose weight.
So that mouse study was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, they got the gut bacteria from the thin mouse to the fat mouse by doing what we call a fecal transplant.
A fecal transplant, right? Yeah.
Where they painted the poop on the arms or the legs of the mice and they lick it off. It's so easy to do in mice. They like doing something like that.
Right. It's what they do naturally.
But the thin mice not only were thin, but they were anxious. Mm-hmm. And so when they did that, the fat mice lost weight and they also became anxious. So that
so interesting.
It's so interesting because I do believe our behavior and how we feel, whether depressed, anxious, whatever, does have something to do with our gut bacteria. And I noticed that when my patients start eating healthy, eating a whole food, plant-based, Mediterranean style diet, oftentimes their depression lifts. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do is you remember that movie Super Size Me? Did you see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You watch this man who was healthy and happy become depressed, fat, anxious, and hurt all over after eating McDonald's for a month. And not only that, they were begging him to stop because they thought his liver was going to dissolve.
Yeah, basically, yeah. They said, if you keep doing this, you're going to die.
Right. So that, to me, was a perfect example of why we all really should think about eating healthy. Because it affects everything. And the microbiome, I think, is where everything is at. They found that people with rheumatoid arthritis, when they're diagnosed, 75% of them have the same gut bacteria. What does that mean? I mean, it's
exactly right. That there's a high correlation. Exactly. When they change their diet, their symptoms can go away.
Yes, it's amazing.
It is amazing. So in Chinese medicine and in Ayurveda, there's this notion of bioindividuality, and that that each different people have different kinds of constitutions, and that what's right for someone might not be as balancing for someone else. And so a model that I really appreciate, because just as you're talking about, like we might have pathways that allow us to easily process certain things and not others, or like certain things that based on our body type and our temperament, that the energetics of the food that we're eating are going to either have an exaggerated effect or a balancing effect. And so we tend to not want to demonize things like eggs, are they good or bad? Or coffee, is it good or bad? Because the question is really much more, is it good or bad for this individual at this point in time, given what they have going on? So I'd like to hear your take on, for example, things like coffee and things like chocolate. Like, who are they good for? Who are they not so good for?
Well, coffee is good for most people. Now,
for most people. Okay.
There are some people that can't metabolize the caffeine. And for those people, it's not such a good thing. And that, again, would be a genetic test that you could tell. What I found is the people that can't metabolize it tend not to like it anyway.
Interesting. See, I'm one of those people who's super caffeine sensitive, and I love the bitter. I love coffee, but it's something that I can only handle in really small amounts. And that if I'm in a state of imbalance where I'm already doing too much and I'm already overworking, it's even less balancing for me because it exaggerates those tendencies. Whereas, at the same time, I live in Oregon. So like on a cold, rainy winter day, having something that revs up and that moves energy upward and outward and is warming, it's so much more medicinal than if I'm like already in a super busy, super active tendency to do too much in the heat of summer. And so like we would look at the energetics of that and see and evaluate that differently depending on different times of the year and what's going on. But it's good to know that it actually can be medicine, because so often we know that it can take us out of balance. Just culturally, that's the emphasis is on speed and productivity and as much of that as possible. And coffee is, of course, the gateway drug to a lot of that for a lot of us. Tell us some good stuff about coffee.
There was a lot of research that has been done, and believe me, I look at all of it because I really like drinking coffee. So I'm always looking to make sure I'm okay.
Yeah.
But initially, the very early research showed that it increased the risk for pancreatic cancer, but in reality, it did not. What they had done was they had taken patients in the hospital with pancreatic cancer. They looked at their coffee consumption, compared it to people in the hospital for other GI problems, gut problems. And of course, the people in the hospital with other gut problems were told not to drink coffee. So that's why it looked like coffee was increasing the risk for pancreatic cancer. And it didn't. And it doesn't. And in fact, it decreases the risk for many cancers, including endometrial cancer. It increases alertness. If you take it early in the morning, you can really boost your ability to focus. It reduces the risk of depression, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and the coolest thing is it reduces the risk for tinnitus or ringing in the ears, which is a humongous problem for a lot of people.
Well, even after the fact?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay. Reduces the risk for, but not medicine for.
Yes. It actually reduces the risk for heart disease, believe it or not. And people think it may increase your blood pressure, but it doesn't. If you're a frequent coffee drinker, it doesn't do anything to your blood pressure. The things you have to be careful with coffee is it can give you reflux and, give you gut pain if you're a reflux person. It can give you a whopping headache if you have been drinking it a long time and stop. And it can have a ton of calories if you don't look at what you're drinking. So, you go to Starbucks and have one of those mocha whatevers, it could be 700 calories. So you don't want to do that either. If you drink drip coffee, you don't have to worry about cholesterol, but the coffee that we used to make, the percolated coffee, and even that fancy French press coffee keeps the oils in the coffee, so it can increase your cholesterol by drinking the oils.
How does that work?
What, the French press and the...
What's the connection between the oils and the coffee and cholesterol?
Well, when you put it through a filter, all those oils go away. But if you keep them, if you drink them, it can increase your LDL cholesterol, your bad cholesterol. Not a ton, but if you're watching it, you want to stay away from the French press and percolated coffee. You don't see that too much anymore. You don't even see it on commercials anymore. But those types of coffees you probably want to avoid if you're trying to keep your cholesterol down.
Excellent. Good to know.
The Basics of Chinese Medicine, Your Inner Ecosystem is an 8-week Learn From Anywhere course that will demystify acupuncture and Chinese medicine. By the end of the course, you'll be able to begin to align your lifestyle and diet with daily and seasonal rhythms so you can digest better, have more energy, and stay healthy, and determine which systems in your body tend to be out of balance and how you might tend to them with lifestyle, diet, acupressure, and more. Each week, you'll get 20 to 30 minutes of an audio lecture so you can listen in your car, at the gym, while you're washing dishes, or wherever. Fun Quizlets, reflection questions, and exercises to reinforce the material you're learning. Plus, you'll get 3 60-minute group phone calls with Brody so you can ask questions, discuss new concepts with classmates, and learn in a group setting. Go to brodywelch.com and click on Basics of Chinese Medicine under the Learn from Home tab to find out more. Classes start October 18th, so reserve your spot today.
And let's talk about chocolate as well.
Oh yeah, chocolate's good.
Because chocolate, I'm so glad to hear you say that because yes, I long consider it a superfood. I'm in love with raw cacao powder. I put it in my smoothies with my greens and and my raw cacao beverage with cardamom and rock salt and stevia or some raw honey is like my favorite treat ever. So tell me something good. What am I doing good for myself by eating chocolate?
So they've studied it. There's a population in Norfolk, England, that they've been studying for a very long time. Those people that eat chocolate every day have a decreased risk for heart disease, dementia, high blood pressure, the whole 9 yards. You need to make sure it's in moderation, that it is pure chocolate, not milk chocolate, not chocolate with nuts, not M&Ms. Those don't really work. But
the raw cacao powder, I'm in good shape with that, yeah.
One really cool thing about chocolate that many people don't know is that it can depress a cough. So if you're like in a theater and you're one of those people who just coughs, just take a small square of dark chocolate, let it melt on your tongue. You will not cough for an hour.
Awesome.
Because of one of the chemicals in the chocolate.
So interesting. Plus the wonderful entheogens that make us feel blissful.
That's right. And in senior citizens or people with decreased blood flow to the brain, when they gave them hot chocolate 2 to 3 times a day, it actually improved blood flow to the brain. So that's
cool.
Another good thing. Yeah. And I mean, if you already had normal blood flow, it's not going to do anything. But if you don't, it will improve the flow.
Good. So getting back to the gut and digestion, we talked a little bit about gut flora as an important factor in weight loss. I'm curious if what you see as the most important factors in helping people lose weight. In Chinese medicine and in Ayurveda, we have the notion of timing of when we eat is as important as what we eat. And so like we think a lot about enabling that 13-hour fast between dinner and breakfast. We think a lot about eating during daylight hours and doing things like meal spacing as opposed to meal stacking, just to give the digestive system a break. I'm curious as to what you found in your practice or in your research as effective ways to help people lose weight.
Well, number one, don't go on a diet. That's number one. What you need to do is find out what is going to work for you to maintain weight loss over a lifetime. Because usually going on a diet means you're going to lose a bunch of weight and then you're going to gain it right back. I was at this nutrition conference recently. It was so interesting most people will gain their weight back after a diet, partly because your body wants you to get back to where you were. It's this thing our brain does. And so you will have cravings that some people will not be able to resist. And we also play tricks on ourselves and think, oh, I lost weight. I'm fine. I can kind of go back to where I was and it'll stay. But it doesn't.
It doesn't. It's that set point thing, right? That where our bodies we have a set point for happiness. We have a set point for weight. And we can mess with those things, but it takes effort.
Right. And so you have to be aware of that. So if you do start to get hungry after you've lost weight, you have to fight that hunger and not give in to the craving. But the key is that you have to really think about losing weight slowly. And we don't like that in our society. We want to do it fast. But when you think about how long it takes you to gain the weight, think about how long it's going to take to lose it. So 1 pound a week is the most I suggest to people. That's number one. And the meal timing thing is huge. So we talk about it in our book. There's a study of women in Israel where they took, I think, 90 women, divided them into 2 groups. They gave them the exact same food over 12 weeks. The only difference was one group got 700 calories for breakfast, 500 for lunch, 200 for dinner. The other group flipped around, 200 for breakfast, 500 for lunch, 700 for dinner. The dinner group lost 7 pounds. The breakfast group lost 17 pounds. So I always tell people, look, if you just flip your meals, you could eat the same stuff you're already eating and you flip your meals, going to lose weight.
Right. Eat dinner for breakfast.
That's
if dinner
right.
is your biggest meal of the day. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Yeah.
It's
Awesome.
Okay. You do not have to eat a big dinner. That's another thing. We have this in our heads. In the United States, we must eat dinner. Well, no, you don't have to eat a big dinner. You can have soup.
Well, and if we look at Dr. John Douillard, I've heard him say on a number of occasions that dinner used to be supper. It used to be a supplemental thing, or like a little soup, a little something extra to tide you over through the night, as like where the main meal was eaten at midday.
Right.
Or earlier in the morning.
Other important thing about losing weight is exercising. And none of us like to exercise. You look at people in the gym, they look miserable. So one of the things we talk about in our book is ballroom dancing. And ballroom dancing is amazing exercise, total body exercise. It exercises your body and your brain. And exercise is another way you can keep your gut bacteria healthy. Because what you do is you foster butyrate-forming bacteria, and that's the good bacteria.
So exercise changes our gut flora.
It does. It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. And that it also, I had heard that, yes, that in terms of dementia and staving that off, that actually physical exercise is more important than mental exercise.
Well,
is that true?
To a point. So there was a great study that was done in New York, and they took over 300 seniors and followed them for over 5 years. At the end of that 5 years, there were 124 that had developed dementia. So they looked back on their lives and looked at what kind of activities they had done. And it looks like, in terms of decreasing your risk for dementia and Alzheimer's, golf, swimming, bicycling reduced it 0%, reduced the risk. Reading reduced it by about 35%. Crossword puzzles by 47%. But there was one activity that decreased it by 76%. And that was ballroom dancing 2 to 3 times a week.
So interesting.
It is. So you're getting the exercise for your body and your brain. And it's that interaction between the other person, leading and following. It doesn't matter which you do. It still increases the neural connections. You grow new neural connections, no matter how old you are, with ballroom dancing. The other cool thing
is fascinating. Yeah, go ahead.
It bypasses the part of the brain that's damaged. So Parkinson's patients can actually dance. They may not walk so well, but you can get them dancing.
Wow, that's really inspiring. Does it have to be ballroom dancing, or could it be something, could it just be throwing your own little dance party, or, doing something like Zumba, or like a more exercise-focused dance?
Exercise-focused dance is good. It'll exercise your brain and your body, and still you're kind of doing a follow thing if you're following the teacher.
Yep.
But it's really that interactive piece with the other person, the touch part too, that's important. And don't get me wrong, dancing's good, whether you're doing it alone or with partners. But if you really want to get the maximum benefit, it's partner dancing. And you don't have to be good either. That's the other thing. You can be a horrible dancer.
Right. Skill is not a factor in whether or not it's going to help your brain.
Right. It still helps your brain. And it helps with all kinds of things. Ballroom dancing helps with depression. It's great for people with social anxiety, because think about it. If you don't like being in a room because you don't like talking to people, or you're worried about talking to people, in a dance class, you don't have to talk to anybody. You're just following the instructors. And then eventually you'll feel comfortable with this group, and then maybe start talking. So there are so many benefits.
Right. And just the fact that we know that social connection is one of the most important things for our mortality risk, right? Like just that feeling connected to a community, having friends, that's a huge factor in whether or not as big of a factor as smoking, I believe I read at one point.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. And exercise too is sitting is probably as big a risk to our health, our cardiovascular health, as smoking. They call it the new smoking, actually.
Yes. I have used that expression a number of occasions. That curiously, it's not something that we can just undo by going for a run or by exercising. It's something that just in and of itself, being sedentary, is a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
My advice, dance.
Dance. I love it. You get into the subject of medicinal mushrooms and their healing properties in your book. And I love that, because those are some of my favorite herbs to use with people. I get through my winters of treating sick people all the time with reishi mushrooms. I feel like those are in Chinese medicine, the mushroom of immortality, and that's said to be effective for literally every system of the body. And those are one of my favorites, but I also carry things like cordyceps and just have used a 5 mushroom blend to help people deal with issues involving immune compromised situations like cancer and treatment of cancer. Obviously, we don't treat cancer directly in Chinese medicine, but we do support the body in general. And so I'd love to hear your take on which mushrooms we should know and how they can help various conditions.
Oh, I love medicinal mushrooms, and I actually suggest my patients use them for a variety of things. So the one that I wrote about a story in the book, which was most traumatic of all, is lion's mane. So
lion's mane as a nerve regenerator, right?
Yes, it helps with nerves. It helps with mood. And it actually helps with certain skin cancers, and it tastes amazing. Have you ever eaten it?
No.
Oh, it's the best. So you saute it. It tastes like lobster. It's really good, and it's high in protein for a mushroom. So I had a patient who came to see me. She was diagnosed with something called Merkel cell tumor. It's a very odd and relatively rare skin cancer. So she'd had this biopsy done, then she had developed some back pain. So I thought, I'll put her on lion's mane, and I put her on something called Stamets 7 from Paul Stamets. It has a blend of 7 different mushrooms, including lion's mane, for helping her with the cancer piece, because there are many mushrooms that help prevent cancer. So I put her on it and kind of forgot about it. And then between the time she had the tumor biopsied and it was taken out, it was about 6 weeks later. She was on the mushrooms the entire time. So the doctor who took out the tumor was the Merkel cell expert up in Washington. And I got a call from him after he looked at the tumor, and he said, "What did you do for this patient?" And I'm like, "I didn't do anything." He goes, "Between the time we did the biopsy and the tumor was removed, the cancer cells were dead. They died. What'd you give her?" And I told him about the lion's mane. He goes, "Oh my gosh, it was the lion's mane. Killed the cancer cells." Merkel cell, especially when it's metastasized, there were very few drugs that did anything that touched it, except for lion's mane, which is what he recommends to all of his patients. And then they decided that he talked to Paul Stamets, where I got the mushrooms from, and they were going to do a study. It never happened because they couldn't standardize the dose of the mushrooms and they couldn't get funding. But they do recommend that those patients take lion's mane. Apparently, Merkel cell comes back frequently. But in my patient, she's been 11 years without a recurrence.
That is super inspiring.
Those mushrooms religiously.
Yeah.
And I recommend it to all my skin cancer patients that they take the whole blend. I recommend my community, which is a blend of 17 mushrooms from Paul Stamets. And then I also have them take turkey tail, because that's another anti-cancer mushroom.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's really, they use it as chemotherapy in Japan for breast cancer.
Yes.
So I always have my patients on that. So, and maitake mushroom's really good for chemo-related problems. So it really helps with the nausea and the lack of energy. So maitake's great for that. And like you said, reishi is good for immune boosting. It's good for asthma as well.
And cardiovascular health.
Yes, and cordyceps is amazing.
Yeah.
My fellowship, I had to try all this stuff. So I'm doing and I waited till the last minute to do everything. So I was doing all kinds of herbs at the same time, and I took the cordyceps, and I'm like, whoa, I have energy.
It is a yang tonic, and in Chinese medicine, it targets the lungs and the kidneys, and so great for another one, good one for asthma as well as stamina.
So there are so many things mushrooms can do, and like you said, keeping you healthy, keeping viruses away, it's amazing.
Well, Dr. Miller, this has been a really fascinating conversation. It seems like you've got a ton of great information in your book, Healed, which is out now and which people can get wherever they get books. Is there anything else that you want to share today with our audience? Or anything else that you want people to know or how they can connect with you?
Well, I definitely want them to read the book, because there are many things in there that I think will really help people to heal in a way that is more natural and with few side effects, except that you'll have fun and you'll feel better. And to connect with the book, you can go to Amazon.com, or we have a website, and you can ask questions on that website if you like and contact us. It's called wellhealed.net. And so you can ask questions of me or my co-author, Dave Kahn, who's the dancer, weightlifter, diet guy, or healthy diet guy. So definitely there's more information on there as well. We have lots of blogs, and I would love to hear from you.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that all gets into the show notes for people to easily reference. Dr. Robin Miller, thank you so much for really enlightening and interesting conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.